Have you ever wired $8,000 a month to your family and never got a single thank you? I used to think I was being generous, helpful, the good daughter, until I saw a message I wasn't supposed to. ATM still working. That's when it hit me. Not everyone needs your help. Some people just get comfortable being funded. Sometimes they're not loving you. They're loving the direct deposit attached to your name. I'm Jessica. I spent 6 years sending money home. Over $300,000, labeled in their budget as Jessica's Base. Color-coded like I was a recurring charge. If you've ever felt guilty for saying no, this video is for you. I'll show you how to draw the line without burning the bridge, how to tell the difference between support and self-sacrifice, and why choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's clarity. The day I stopped sending money, my mom texted, "Bank glitch?" A day later, I saw a group chat called Operation Boca. They weren't broke, they were just budgeting me in. I wasn't angry, I was done. So if you've ever been the reliable one, the fixer, the rescuer, but deep down you feel tired, this is your sign. Silence isn't consent, and peace doesn't have to be earned. You're allowed to stop funding what no longer feeds you. Before we dive into the story, let's connect. Have you ever felt stuck, searching for the depths of manifestation? Drop a 3 in the comments if you're ready to unlock your true potential, or a 4 if you're still finding your way. Let's start this journey together. You don't notice the leash when it's made of love and direct deposit. It started with a phone call. I was standing in the kitchen of my brand new studio apartment in Capitol Hill, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug I'd bought at Goodwill. The walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint, and I was still adjusting to the quiet hum of independence. No footsteps upstairs, no dishes clinking in the sink, just me and the soft buzz of city life outside my window. "Jess?" Dad's voice came through my phone, a little too chipper for a weekday afternoon. "Hey, sweetheart, everything going okay?" It was one of those calls where the small talk felt too small. I should have noticed then. After a few pleasantries, he launched into it. "We've had a bit of a tight month," he said, stretching the phrase like it would sound softer if drawn out. "Utilities caught up with us and your brother's COBRA coverage lapses next week. We didn't expect the dental thing to cost so much." I stood there, blinking at the sunlight spilling across my floorboards, wondering how a root canal had become my financial responsibility. But instead of asking, I said, "How much do you need?" There was a pause, like he hadn't expected me to say yes so fast. Maybe 2,000, just to get us through this hump. I wired the money that evening. It felt like the right thing to do, like the adult thing. I had just been promoted to account analyst at a logistics firm downtown. My paycheck wasn't huge, but it was enough. Besides, this was family, and family helps each other, or so I believed. By summer, the calls became more frequent. First, it was a little more for groceries. Then, we're still behind on car payments. Dad always sounded apologetic at first. "Just until we catch up," he promised. "As soon as we sell the lake house, we'll pay you back." That lake house had been on the market since 2016. Somewhere between July and October, the $2,000 quietly doubled. I didn't even notice the pattern until Nina pointed it out. "Wait," she said one night, sipping wine on my couch as we watched reruns of Jeopardy. "You're sending them how much now?" "4," I muttered, half hoping she'd mishear. "400?" I didn't correct her. I didn't have to. She turned toward me, eyes wide. "Jessica." I shrugged. "It's temporary." Nina didn't argue. She never did. But the way she set her wine glass down, softly, deliberately, said everything. By Thanksgiving, I was exhausted. I'd taken on a second client outside work doing freelance data entry just to keep up. My fridge was mostly condiments and half bags of kale, but I'd booked a flight home, hoping for some sort of warmth. A thank you, maybe, or at least a chance to sit down with Mom and go over the numbers. I had a folder labeled Receipts Carter Transfers in my Gmail and another in my desk drawer just in case. We were still passing the mashed potatoes when Ryan leaned back, grinning. "Check this out," he said, pulling up his phone. Sunlit beaches, neon cocktails, hammocks strung between palm trees. Tulum was fire. No one blinked. No one questioned the cost. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to ruin dinner. By the end of 2018, the monthly wire was $8,000. It arrived without prompt and without acknowledgement. At first, Dad would text a quick, "You saved us again," or "We're so lucky to have you." Then came the occasional thumbs up emoji. Then, nothing. No more thanks. Just silence, or worse, new requests. Mom would email vague things like, "If you have a little extra this month, Ryan's thinking of enrolling in that digital media course." Or, "Your dad's car needs new tires and the winter's coming up fast." There was always something, and every month I complied, until January. That was when Mom sent the wrong file. I'd asked for the heating bill to file under miscellaneous deductions for my taxes. She responded with an Excel sheet. Subject line, January docs. Attachment, Carter Family Monthly Ops. At first, I thought she'd attached the wrong thing. Then I saw the tabs, mortgage, groceries, miscellaneous Ryan, Jessica's base. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. $8,000, labeled under my name, color-coded in pale yellow like I was just another recurring charge. Next to it, potential adjustment plus 10% Q2 if promotion confirmed. I read it twice, 3 times. Every line felt like a betrayal I hadn't earned. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line item, a stable input in a formula someone else had written. That night, I walked 3 laps around the block before I could fall asleep. The cold air bit through my jacket, but I didn't feel it. I was too busy counting backward from 10, trying not to cry, because for the first time, I realized something I couldn't unknow. I thought I was helping. Turns out I was budgeted, and budgets can be reallocated. You can learn a lot about people by what they serve you and what they keep for themselves. The air bit through my coat as I stepped out of the rental car, basket in hand. The sourdough I'd baked 2 nights ago, wrapped tightly in linen and still giving off a faint, warm scent, felt heavier than it should have. I hadn't been home in nearly a year, and the silence between visits had grown thick. But still, I showed up. Holiday loyalty, or habit, I wasn't sure. The house looked pristine, too pristine. The driveway had been resealed, and a brand new outdoor deck wrapped around the back like something out of a magazine. Teak furniture gleamed under a November sky, and string lights hung in perfect swoops across the railing. There was no deck last Christmas. The front door opened before I rang the bell. Mom stood there in a deep burgundy cashmere sweater, definitely not from last season. Her makeup flawless, her smile wide and practiced. "Sweetheart, look at you," she cooed. Her arms opened wide but didn't quite wrap around me. I could smell citrus and cinnamon on her neck. It was the same candle line she used when staging homes for real estate showings. Her hug was warm, but it didn't linger. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with too many scents to come from one oven. A floral bouquet dominated the center island. A luxury espresso machine I'd only ever seen in hotels sat gleaming on the counter. I placed my sourdough beside it. No one noticed. Dad appeared moments later, clapping me on the back, then guiding me into the living room where the charcuterie board was already set. "You made good time," he said cheerfully, pouring me a glass of white wine without asking what I'd prefer. Ryan came in shortly after, wearing a pea coat I recognized from a limited-run designer drop. A woman trailed behind him, tall, pretty, with expensive boots and a bottle of imported wine under one arm. "Jess, meet Kenzie," he said casually, dropping his leather duffel by the coat rack. "Kenzie, this is the family genius/piggy bank." He laughed. She smiled uncertainly. I smiled back, but something inside me crinkled. Dinner was polished, curated, like it had been built for Instagram. Gold-rimmed plates, linen napkins, at least 4 side dishes that looked professionally plated. The stuffing was dotted with ruby-red cranberries. Mom had never used cranberries. "You didn't have to go all out," I said, trying to keep it light. She waved a hand. "Oh, it's the holidays. You only live once. There was no mention of my job, no questions about the product I'd just helped launch in Seattle, or the new title I'd earned after 3 grueling quarters. I offered details anyway, hoping they'd bite. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, brushing a crumb off the tablecloth, "but you've always been so driven. We're not surprised." The conversation pivoted to Ryan's trip to Costa Rica and Kenzie's startup job in San Francisco. I sipped the wine slowly, unsure if it was me or the room that felt hollow. Then came the moment. Dad leaned in, voice casual. "You know, Jess, you should really consider buying us that timeshare in Boca. It'd be a good investment, something for the whole family." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "You work so hard, sweetheart. It'd be a win-win." And then Ryan, without missing a beat, chuckled and said, "Don't forget, Jess is the family ATM." Laughter bubbled around the table. Even Kenzie let out a polite chuckle. I looked down at my plate. The sourdough still sat untouched on the counter. They hadn't even sliced it open. I pushed my chair back slowly, murmured something about needing to freshen up, and slipped into the laundry room. It was dim, quiet except for the low hum of the dryer. I folded a towel out of habit, grounding myself in something ordinary. That's when I heard them. "She's here. We might as well ask," Dad said, low but clear. "Oh, David," Mom responded, half laughing. "You think she'll go for covering the property taxes too?" A pause. Then laughter. Quiet but sharp enough to cut. I didn't move. The towel stayed in my hands, half folded. My chest tightened, not from surprise but from clarity. This wasn't a slip. It was a pattern, a rhythm they had learned to expect. That night, in the spare bedroom, still decorated with faded floral curtains and an old twin bed, I called Nina. "They laughed," I said, "when Ryan called me the ATM, and they've got a new espresso machine, deck furniture, catered dinner. They're not struggling. They're just used to me filling in the gaps." Her voice came through after a long breath. "And what did you do?" I folded towels. Silence. "And did you laugh?" "No." "Then maybe it's time you stop playing the part." I stared at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks in the paint. In the corner, a stack of old board games sat untouched. I remembered playing Monopoly there as a kid, always the banker, always the one keeping track. For the first time, I didn't feel generous. I felt harvested. There's a particular kind of rain that visits Seattle in March, not heavy, not loud, just persistent, like a whisper that doesn't stop. I liked it, usually. It gave me permission to slow down, to disappear behind a window, sip something warm, and let the world shrink to the size of a coffee cup. That morning, I was at the cafe by Green Lake, tiny tables, jazz humming in the background, and the same barista who always complimented my earrings. I was sipping chamomile, my laptop open but untouched. The rain painted lines down the window. I remember feeling almost still, like my mind had exhaled. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and espresso. There was a young couple behind me arguing in low tones about curtain rods. Across from me, a man was typing furiously with earbuds in, mouthing every word. I had a book in my bag, unread, an inbox full of emails, ignored. My phone was on the table, face down. Then it buzzed. I flipped it over, expecting a calendar reminder or a message from Nina. Instead, it was from Mom. The preview read, "Here's the update. Still pushing the health excuse. ATM's still working." I blinked. I wasn't sure what it meant. My thumb tapped it automatically. It was a screenshot from a group chat labeled Operation Boca. I don't remember clicking the image. I just know I did, like muscle memory. Then, there it was. Line after line of text, familiar names, familiar tones, but a language I didn't recognize. "Push the health excuse again," someone wrote. "ATM still working," came another reply, with a laughing emoji. Then Dad, "Don't guilt trip too hard. She still thinks we need help." There are moments in life when your brain stutters, when time doesn't slow down exactly, but your understanding of it does. I sat there, eyes locked on the screen, not breathing. Then came the last line. Mom, she'll pay. She always does. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I didn't flinch. Not visibly, but my heart thudded once, hard, like it had hit the edge of something sharp. I put my tea down. The cup clinked against the saucer, loud in a quiet way. I looked around. The cafe was still there. Still rain, still jazz, still the smell of cinnamon. But I wasn't in it anymore. I wasn't the woman sipping tea on a slow morning. I was a ledger entry, a line on someone else's budget. I closed the message. Then, carefully, I opened my laptop. Not to check email. I opened a blank spreadsheet. It had been a long time coming. 6 years of deposits. I still had most of the receipts. Old habits die hard. I began logging each one, column by column. Date, amount, reason given, who asked, notes. I could remember the wording in their texts almost verbatim. Under March 2018, I typed, Ryan's dental surgery, claimed insurance delay, $1,800. Under September 2019, I typed, emergency furnace repair, $12,500. I created a tab for phone calls, another labeled requests phrased as emergencies. I made one for holidays with attached financial asks, then another, no response after transfer. Each row added weight and clarity, not pain, clarity. I remembered something then, being 12, sitting at the kitchen table with a box of crayons and my mother's unpaid utility bills. I'd made little color-coded notes, pretending to be an accountant. Mom laughed and said, "You were born to take care of things." Back then, I thought it was a compliment. I thought it meant I was needed. Now it felt more like I'd been drafted into a war I never agreed to fight. Nina called just after noon. "You at Green Lake?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded normal, too normal. "2. You free tonight?" "I might work late," I said. Something came up. There was a pause. "You okay?" "I'm getting there." She didn't push. Nina never did. "Want me to bring soup?" "Only if it comes with truth serum," I said, forcing a smile. "Deal. Miso or tomato basil?" "Miso," I said, barely hearing myself. We hung up. I stared at the spreadsheet. Then I added one more tab. Forgiveness cost. I didn't know what would go in it yet, but I left it there, bolded. That evening, Nina showed up anyway, one hand holding takeout, the other gripping a bouquet of eucalyptus and white tulips. We sat on the couch. I told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just listened, the way only someone who really knows you can. When I was done, she exhaled and said, "You knew, deep down." I think I did. And now? Now, I said, I make my own budget. Later that night, alone again, I walked past the mirror in my hallway and caught a glimpse of myself, not in work clothes, not in daughter mode, just me. And for the first time, I didn't look tired. I looked aligned. It's funny, when you grow up being the responsible one, you think it's a virtue. But sometimes it's a label people stick to you so they don't have to step up themselves. I didn't cry that night. I didn't call my parents. I just turned off the lamp, closed the laptop, and slept. Because for once, the numbers weren't for them. They were mine. And I was finally ready to count. Seattle felt especially gray that morning, not just from the clouds, but from something heavier in the air. I sat on my couch with my laptop warming my legs, staring at my online banking portal. The balance stared back. Familiar, diminished, tired. I used to find comfort in numbers. Now they just looked like bruises I couldn't explain. I hadn't told anyone, not yet. But this was the morning I'd decided. No more $8,000 transfers. No more pretending this was normal. It started 2 nights earlier. Nina had come over with takeout from that Thai place on Mercer I liked. She didn't speak right away. She just handed me a container of Pad See Ew and waited. I think she knew I had something to say. And I did. I told her everything. The text message I wasn't meant to see. The spreadsheet I'd built from scratch. 6 years of deposits. No one had asked me to track them, but no one had ever thanked me either. That's the thing about being the reliable one. People start confusing your silence with consent. Nina leaned back against my couch. Chopsticks paused mid-air. Jess, you know this isn't okay, right? I thought I did, I whispered. And what are you going to do with all that proof you collected? Frame it? Her voice was sharp, but not unkind. She always knew when to push. I told her I'd already reduced the next deposit from $8,000 to $2,000. I didn't send a message. I didn't offer a warning. I just did it. It felt like breaking a rule I hadn't realized I'd signed up for. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Bank glitch? Need help? It was Mom. No hi, no emoji. Just a diagnosis wrapped in a question mark. I didn't answer. For once, I wanted the silence to say something louder than I could. Later that day, I walked to the store. Just to get out, I told myself. Rain tapped gently against my jacket hood. At the checkout line, I spotted a bouquet of yellow tulips. I picked them up before I could talk myself out of it. For years, I'd sent flowers to Mom on her birthday, to Ryan when he got a new job, even to Dad when he hurt his back. But this bouquet was for me. I set it on my kitchen counter when I got home, next to the laptop still open to my financial spreadsheet. I opened a new tab and searched Family Emotional Manipulation. The phrase felt clinical, too stiff, but I didn't know what else to call it. The next day, I sat across from Dr. Lila Green, a therapist recommended by Nina. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and old books. There was a print of a mountain over the couch and a jar of candy no one seemed to touch. I sat with my hands folded, unsure how to start. Dr. Green listened patiently as I explained how it started, how it snowballed. The guilt I felt each time I hesitated before transferring money, how I always told myself, they need me. She nodded slowly. Jessica, what you're describing, it's what we call a covert emotional contract. A what? It's when someone rewards your compliance with affection or approval, often in exchange for something they never clearly asked for, but expect. And breaking that contract often feels like betrayal, even though you never agreed to it in the first place. I let the words sink in, covert emotional contract, like a leash made of smiles and thank yous, until even the smiles disappeared. We talked about boundaries, about the difference between support and self-sacrifice, about how it's okay to love people and still protect yourself. When I left her office, it wasn't raining. The sky hadn't cleared, but it had lightened just enough to feel like a beginning. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table. I deleted the shared family budgeting app from my phone, an app I'd helped build, populate, and maintain. The irony didn't escape me. Years ago, I'd labeled one column Jess Contributions. Now I wanted no column at all. A voicemail blinked on my phone. I pressed play. Dad's voice crackled through. Jess, listen. Don't forget who kept you grounded. We made you who you are. We held you up when things were tough. He didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed. And that hurt more than if he'd shouted, because underneath it was the same unspoken rule. You owe us. I let the message play out, then deleted it. Afterward, I opened my email and typed in a name I hadn't thought of in years, Rachel Lynn. We went to college together. She was always the smart one in constitutional law, the one who asked the professor sharp questions no one else dared. Last I heard, she was working with estate planning and financial disputes. Subject, family inquiry, possible legal boundaries. I didn't write more than that. I wasn't ready yet, but I hit send. The tulips were still bright on my counter. Some of the petals were starting to curl inward at the edges, but the color remained. I stared at them for a while. Not everything beautiful has to last forever to mean something. And not every contract has to be honored just because it's old. The line I'd crossed? It wasn't the transfer reduction. It was deciding I got to matter too. Some betrayals come in whispers. Others come with legal documents. September swept into Seattle on a dry wind, turning the maple leaves outside my apartment the color of rusted pennies. The light had that golden edge it only gets a few weeks a year, bright and brittle at the same time. I sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, waiting for Rachel Lynn to join our video call. My tea cooled untouched. I wasn't nervous exactly, more like watchful, the way you feel when you know you're about to see the shape of something you've only sensed in the dark. Rachel's face appeared, framed by tidy shelves and a diploma. She'd been 2 dorm rooms down my sophomore year. Brilliant, unflappable, the kind of person who never misplaced a paperclip. Now she practiced fiduciary law and sounded exactly the same, except her voice carried the calm of somebody paid to translate chaos into clauses. "I've reviewed the statements you forwarded," she began, tapping a file. "First, the transfers we discussed are perfectly traceable, but there's an additional issue." She shared her screen. Line after line of my credit card charges rolled by. Restaurants in towns I'd never visited, a high-end spa in Westchester, 2 airline tickets booked in my name but sent to an email address ending in ourfamily.com. My stomach went cool, the way metal feels before a winter storm. "They added themselves as authorized users," Rachel said. "Legally, it's fraud." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I only asked, "What's the next step?" "We send a cease and desist, immediate removal of their access, demand for repayment, notice of potential civil action. You'll need to sign today." The cursor blinked beside a dollar total I had never agreed to spend. I thought about Mom's text last week, bank glitch, and how I'd left it unanswered. Silence felt a lot like strength just then. I signed. 2 days later, the papers went out by courier. That evening, my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Dad's number flashed next. I watched it vibrate across the counter until it stopped. Then another call, and another. When the ringing finally settled, a single voicemail icon glowed. Dad's voice was a practiced mix of patience and disappointment. "Jessica, we don't know what this lawyer nonsense is about. After everything we did, keeping you grounded, putting food in your mouth, you can't throw legal threats at your own parents. Call us back. Remember who made you who you are." I deleted the message. My thumb didn't hesitate. A minute later, Ryan sent a text. "Guess we're not good enough for your big tech money?" I blocked his number. Then, annoyed by the finality of it, I unblocked him. The silence felt better than any reply, so I blocked him again. Guilt knocked once and couldn't find a place to sit. The next morning, Rachel confirmed delivery of the cease and desist. 48 hours later, she forwarded an email from my parents' newly hired attorney refusing liability and accusing me of breach of familial duty. I almost laughed. Apparently, love now came with itemized deductions. Thursday's mail brought the real blow, a thick envelope stamped certified. Inside, a letter from a firm in Connecticut stating that my parents intended to recover historic family support costs through civil channels. They were suing me for what they called repayment of upbringing expenses, food, clothing, school supplies, totaled at a figure that rounded nicely to the amount I had already given them plus interest. The paper smelled of toner and starch. I set it flat on the table, poured myself a generous glass of red wine, and felt, strangely, lighter. If they wanted numbers, I had more than numbers. I had dates, voicemails, every health emergency annotated. They were about to learn exactly how responsible I could be when the ledger was mine. I carried the wine into the spare room that still held boxes from my last office move. I hadn't opened them since the day I resigned that job and took the Seattle promotion. The cardboard gave a soft sigh as I sliced the tape. On top sat a framed 8x10 photo. Me at 8 years old, gap-toothed, holding a science fair ribbon almost as wide as my shoulders. Dad had snapped the picture, proud, telling everyone his daughter would run the numbers for the world one day. I lifted the frame, brushed dust from the glass, and wondered if he remembered saying it, and if he realized I'd been running their numbers all along. I set the photo on my desk, opened a new folder on my laptop, and titled it, My Terms, PDF. Inside would go every transfer, every fraudulent charge, Rachel's letters, and eventually my own conditions for any conversation that might happen on the far side of this fight. If they wanted an accounting, I would give them one. Clear, concise, and final. Outside, wind rattled the window. Leaves skittered down the sidewalk like small, hurried promises. I took another sip of wine and watched their quick escape. Not everything that falls is broken, I thought. Some things finally land where they can rest. I saved the empty file, its name bright in the folder. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and let the apartment grow quiet around me. Still, but no longer accusatory. Just mine. Freedom didn't arrive with a shout. It came quietly, on the first of the month, when nothing left my account. No alert from the bank. No automatic transfer. No quiet theft disguised as family obligation. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. The silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. The kitchen was warm with morning light. Seattle in January could still surprise you with sun. A tea kettle whistled gently as I moved around the apartment, slower than usual. I'd let the tea steep longer now, not because I forgot, but because I could afford to wait. For the first time in years, my money was mine. Every cent. I had opened a new account in my own name a week earlier. No shared access, no familiar Carter names listed on the beneficiary line. Just me, Jessica Lynn Carter. I watched the tea swirl as I poured it, steam catching in the air. It smelled like lavender and peace. The lilies I'd bought a few days before still stood tall on the table, coral-tipped petals, full and bright, the kind my mom once called too flashy. Now I placed them front and center. I smiled at the way they took up space, unapologetically. Later that morning, I met Nina at our favorite cafe. She ordered her usual black coffee and eggs over easy. I went for something I hadn't had in years, waffles with whipped cream, the real kind. To your last payment, Nina said, lifting her mug. I raised mine back, and to never funding a Boca retirement plan again. We both laughed, but beneath it was something else. Relief, validation, a tiny ember of pride I was finally letting glow. Halfway through brunch, Michael passed by the window and saw us. He tapped the glass once, gentle, casual. Nina nudged me but didn't say a word. I waved. He waved back and ducked into the bookstore next door. He's sweet, Nina said. I'm not ready, I replied. You don't have to be, she said. Just don't close the door entirely. We split the bill. This time, she insisted on paying. Consider it your freedom brunch, she smiled. When I got home, I stood in the middle of the living room and let the quiet settle. I didn't rush to do anything. I didn't check my phone. I let my shoulders drop and just breathed. Eventually, I picked up the phone and dialed my mom. I wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe. Closure. Voicemail. I didn't hesitate. Hi, Mom. I hope you're okay. I paused, listening to the stillness on the line. But I'm not your bank anymore. I'm not angry, just done. I wish you well. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the message 10 times. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of tea. Still warm. Dr. Green had left me a voicemail that morning. Jessica, boundaries are an act of care. Not just for others, but for yourself. Let this be the year you stop justifying peace. I walked out onto the small balcony and looked at the street below. People moved, cars passed, a kid laughed while chasing a dog in a coat too big for it. Life was happening, without drama, without crisis, and I was part of it now, not managing it, not funding it, just living it. I picked up my notebook and began sketching out the details for something I had long put off, my mentorship fund, a small grant program for young women in tech from low-income families, something practical, quiet, purposeful. I wasn't doing it for applause. I was doing it because I finally had the bandwidth to offer more than just money. I had clarity, time, intention, and heart. That evening, I passed the florist on my way home from picking up groceries. Another bouquet of lilies called to me. I didn't hesitate. At home, I trimmed the stems and arranged them in the same vase I'd once hidden behind the toaster. the vase I hadn't touched since college. This time, I placed it right by the window. I sat back in my favorite chair, sipping tea, watching the light change across the floorboards. I wasn't waiting for my parents to call. I wasn't expecting a thank you or a reckoning. I already had what I needed. I wasn't waiting for them to understand anymore. I had already become someone they never asked about. And now, I was finally asking myself, what came next? There was no applause the day I chose myself, just the quiet comfort of a cup of tea, steeped a little longer than usual. The final payment wasn't just about money. It was the moment I stopped proving and started living. Sometimes, love means showing up. Other times, it means stepping back. When we teach others how to treat us, we remind ourselves what we're worth, not through anger, but with quiet, steady clarity. If this story reminded you of a moment when you chose peace over obligation, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below or share this with someone who might need a gentle reminder. Freedom doesn't always shout, but it does arrive, and where are you watching from today? I'd love to know what part of the world you're in and whether this story stirred something in you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. You never know who might need to read your words.